Welcome back, everybody. Another episode of Fat City Spinout. Recent finds, listens, what have you. Bringing us in the rhythms of ska with the driving horns, the chugging beat. Jamaica's first homegrown music form, arising out of a blend of jazz, rhythm and blues, other influences. As produced here by Cecil Bustamante Campbell, better known as Prince Buster. Roll on Charles Street, 2020 compilation out of Japan. The Raka Shaka record label, double LP. Liner notes by the great Steve Barrow. Great horn solos. Vaguely Latin feel there. Latin music, another influence on ska. This focuses on the early 60s ska years of Prince Buster. Prince Buster was a street gang leader, a amateur boxer. He idolized Muhammad Ali, who later became a personal friend of his. Like Ali, he followed Ali into the Islamic faith. He was also one of the foundation members of Jamaica's musical fraternity. First as a sound system follower. He was employed by Cox and Dodd for a while as kind of unofficial security to protect him from some of the toughs associated with rival Duke Reed, as Buster was fearless and unable to be intimidated by anyone. Soon set up his own sound system called Voice of the People. He had a higher purpose in mind for the music, to give voice to the underprivileged, to what he saw as his people. And this kind of outsider aesthetic, this kind of positioning the music to say something more meaningful would become ingrained in the DNA of Jamaican music. Prince Buster, ska productions from the early 1960s, largely instrumentals here, a few vocals either by Buster himself or Derek Morgan, sometimes with Derek and Patsy, duo vocals. Also rare Slim Smith on here, credited as Dakota Jim for some reason, maybe under license to another record label. And instrumentals by the likes of the Buster All-Stars, Roland Alfonso, and the great Don Drummond, founder of the Scatolites. Some great blazing ska here. Prince Buster would go on to move through the various phases of Jamaican music, rock steady, into reggae, put out one of the very early dub albums. This later period of his career is focused on in another recent release I picked up from Dub Vendor Records out of the UK. Shout out to them. Prince Buster, Africa Islam Revolution, focuses more on late 60s, early 70s period of Prince Buster's work, and with a more social and political message in place, more vocals by him on display. Nice compilation from the Earth Sounds label. Prince Buster, the more politically minded side of him. From Dub Vendor Records, I also picked up the I Am the Gorgon documentary on the late Bunny Striker Lee. Great documentary. I had not watched it yet when I made my own tribute to him. This tells his story much more eloquently than I could, with narration by the great DJ Dennis Al Capone, and runs through his career and his many accomplishments and productions. Also comes with with some bonus features, which I have not checked out yet. I also picked up the book on Bunny Lee, Reggae Going International. Went through a huge Bunny Lee listening phase, and both of these come with CD kind of greatest hits. Have not started reading this book as yet, but looks definitely very informative, very detailed. All of these came out just a few years ago through his own Jamaican Recordings label. the late great Bunny Lee. I've been checking out the jazz reissues of the Black Jazz label that have been coming out from the Real Gone music label, which is a label a reissue label I hadn't checked out before. The Black Jazz label was one of a number of community-based, progressive-minded black labels that arose in the early 1970s in various parts of the United States. It was founded by jazz pianist Gene Russell in connection with Dick Shorey, who was a percussionist who had been working for RCA Records, where he had helped develop the Dynagroove pressings as well as quadraphonic sound, and had founded Ovation Records, which would provide the Black Jazz label with distribution and finance, while Gene Russell was on the creative end of things. Gene Russell's own New Directions album was the first album to be released on the Black Jazz label in the early 1970s and was the first reissue to appear for Record Store Day this year. I have not grabbed that one yet, could not find it locally, but I did pick up some of the other reissues from the Real Gone music. It's become a very collectible label, which I was curious to check out. Walter Bishop Jr., Choral Keys, another jazz keyboard album, kind of a unique black and white theme to the Black Jazz label releases, with the back cover repeated upside down. The idea being it could be faced any which way in a record store, and you could find it. And I got a nice colored pressing on this one. These come with liner notes, and they actually come in quite nice, high quality inner sleeves as well. Usually I swap out my inner sleeves right away if they're just a cheap paper one. These ones I've been keeping. And this features, who's on here? Idris Muhammad is on drums on some tracks here. Basically kind of soul jazz leaning, kind of groove based tracks on here, mostly original. Walter Bishop had played with, I believe, Gene Ammons, Art Blakey, and many others. Been around for a long time. The tracks kind of go off in random directions, but always kind of come back to the central riff or motif, groove-based, kind of cool album. Perhaps the most politically minded of these releases, the first batch of releases, Doug Carn's Spirit of the New Land, featuring vocals by then-wife Jean Carn. And again, this is a colored pressing. I've been trying to grab the colored ones if I can when they come out. They've been selling out quick and starting to go for higher prices quite quickly. This takes a couple of tracks. Miles Davis's Blue and Green, Arise and Shine, which has a very political message of black consciousness. Lee Morgan's Search for the New Land, which has some lyrics added to it, with Doug Carn on keys and vocals by wife Jean, and full band here, including Charles Tolliver, who was founder of the Strata East label, another one of these very progressive-minded black jazz labels. Vocal jazz album was Kelly Patterson, who is a beauty queen. She was the first black Miss Indiana in 1971, with this album appearing a year or two later. Vocal jazz with a cover of Herbie Hancock's Maiden Voyage, which gives the album its title, with lyrics added to it. Just got the standard black pressing on this one. And a couple of tracks that, like Soul Daddy, that go in a more sassy rhythm and blues direction, which she would pursue later on in her career. She made the talk show circuit rounds and a few more sporadic recordings. The only full band album put out by the Black Jazz label was The Awakenings, Hear, Sense, and Feel. They were from Chicago, where they were associated with some of the members of the Art Ensemble of Chicago. Again, just standard black pressing. Colored one was sold out already. And this has kind of a very melodic feel to it. Some tracks have quite a bright kind of morning feel. Others have this late night kind of somnambulant mood. Very, very nice album here. All original compositions by the group. And the most recent one I picked up most recent reissue, Roland Haynes, Second Wave. Was able to grab the colored pressing of this as well. This is more funky, definitely getting into some soul jazz territory, featuring Henry Franklin on bass of the Skipper album, which I'm sure will be appearing as a later reissue. I'm trying to grab, many of these have never been reissued before, so I've been trying to grab them as they come out. We'll see how it goes. Moving into some proto-hip-hop from The Last Poets. I grabbed this online from a seller I kind of keep an eye on, The Last Poets. This is Madness, featuring that stunning cover art. This appeared from the Douglas label, Alan Douglas production. Bit of water damage on the cover, and straight out of the Bronx, New York. Former owner Charles Wallace. Shout out to you. The Last Poets were a collective of street poets, very militant, very informed by Black Power, the Black consciousness movement of the late 60s, early 1970s. They had got their name from a South African poet, the idea being that this would be the last generation of poets who would fight their battles with words, because the revolution was coming and the guns and the shooting would begin. Super, super militant. They were a huge influence on the later hip-hop generation, particularly the more militant acts like Public Enemy. It's been sampled many times. Tribe Called Quest, I think, sampled off of this album, among many others. And this features the famous Mean Machine chant of, how does it go? Automatic, something remote control, something or other, which was even adapted into hip-hop, or not hip-hop, reggae. The DJ Big Youth would kind of freely adapt it into automatic pistol remote control, Dennis the Menace to Rock Your Soul. He apparently had owned this album. Also includes the famous line, John Coltrane died in vain of a love supreme. Just blazingly militant street poet, backed by very minimalist percussion, drum beats. Another online pickup. This is one I had owned on cassette back when it was new. Hip-hop album. I haven't shown a lot of hip-hop for a long time. It's gangsta hip-hop. And for this one, actually, I have to switch to my OG Lokes. I never knew what these were. There's a little skit on this album. I owned this on cassette at the time. There's kind of a skit in between tracks where they go, are you tired of people getting in your business? Buy some Lokes, now available at your nearest South Central liquor store. And I never knew what that meant until I was traveling through California a few years ago, stopped in at a gas station, and they were selling Lokes at the gas station. Cheap pair of sunglasses, as popularized by the South Central gangster rappers of the late 1980s. Above the Law were associated with NWA. Dr. Dre does some production on here. They actually famously, the crew famously got into a scuffle with Ice Cube and his posse, the Lynch Mob. When there was a split between him and NWA, they sided with NWA, and members of NWA do appear on here. Gangster rap, it's been described as proto-G-Funk. I don't remember anyone using that term when this came out. This is original on Ruthless Records, and I did have this on cassette. I had this whole tape cassette with many of these things on here. I think I bought this across the line in the United States. You couldn't really find this kind of music at home. I definitely had NWA. I was into anything they did. I had Public Enemy, Run DMC, stuff like that. And then for some reason I threw it all out years ago. This is one I was never able to replace. So when it came up online, I had to grab it. And when it arrived, actually had some promo type material in here, kind of a bio. And I think there's a photo in here as well. Above the Law. Very dense beats and samples on here, not quite as stripped down as you might be familiar with from NWA's music. That might be where the G-Funk description comes in. Also not quite as profane as NWA's music, but you definitely want to be careful where you're listening to this. No little kids around. Above the Law. Came with the mega side and the ranching side. Last one I'll show today is a new compilation of reggae singer Johnny Clark, one of my longtime favorite singers, heavily associated with Bunny Striker Lee. Was one of his main go-to guys, was pumping out a furious rate of hit songs and albums through the 1970s, mostly in association with Bunny Lee. This compilation from Patat Records out of France takes a slightly late look at a slightly later period of his work. 1976 to 86, I think mostly early to mid 80s on here. Reproduction Hulk label there. And this is produced by Rodwell Blackbeard Sinclair, who is the brother of DJ and producer Tapazuki. Backed by the Ringcraft Posse and the Roots Radix. Includes an update of his very first hit, Everyday Wondering. African Roots is maybe one of his more well-known Roots songs. I think that was co-produced with Bunny Lee. But mainly this is kind of a more laid-back side of Johnny Clark. Even moody on a couple of sides. Takes a little time to grow on you, but definitely a nice compilation of one of the great Roots singers who at the height of his popularity rivaled better known names like Dennis Brown and Bob Marley in Jamaica. And I actually had one of the tracks from that compilation on 12-inch. I picked this up locally years ago, found it in a little batch of 12-inch singles. This is from the High Power Music label, Apple of My Eye. Don't know if you can see that. Apple of My Eye, Johnny Clark, original 12-inch with version by the Ringcraft Posse on the back. The High Power label is founded by a guy called General Lee. Again, don't know if you can see that. General Lee. I've had some sporadic communications with him through my Facebook page. He's messaged me a couple of times asking for scans of some of the records in my collection, mainly Sly and Robbie related. I think he's putting out some reissues in connection with them, so he's been asking for scans of certain LPs. So kind of maybe I'll see some of my photos show up on a reissue sometime. That'd be kind of cool. So that's what I've got for you today, guys. Trying to keep these videos a little shorter, not always successful. Thanks for hanging out with me as always. I will have more for you soon. Peace.